Hello, I'm Dan Atwood from AVIO Consulting. I've been working with Oracle Business Process Management and all of its predecessor products from BEA and Fuego for the last 16 years. I've been in the trenches on many BPM projects as a project manager, a business analyst, and as a developer. I currently head up training at AVIO Consulting, and I help mentor new customers as they're getting started with Oracle BPM and now PCS. One thing you need to be aware of right now, there's a Q&A session following this, but you don't have to wait until the end to post your questions. You can go ahead and post your questions now and do it throughout the presentation as you're thinking of it in a demonstration. Here's the agenda. In this, I'll be going over the purpose of Oracle Process Cloud Service, or PCS, and some of the business and IT benefits. PCS is very simple to use. And as with most tools, we all usually start off with a Hello World application. And since this is a brand new product, I'll be doing a little bit more than this, but it's basically a Hello World. It's a small project that we can get done in a very short period of time to demonstrate some of the tools, unique capabilities, and to show you what can be created in just a few minutes. Towards the end, I'll go over some different ways that we see it being used and plan to be used by customers that we've been working with. So one of the great frustrations that I hear business talk about today is the money and the effort it takes to solve their own business problems. As I said, it comes up pretty often with customers, but just in the last couple of months, I've worked with 3 different companies who are trying to ensure the process of supplying new products to customers was competitive. The process owner on each of those, they face the same problems that a lot of companies face when they're rolling out new products. One of their biggest issues was the time and the cost it took IT to deliver solutions. One director I met with, he was frustrated with his inability to get involved in what was being delivered. He didn't feel like the business was being involved in the process of creating processes, and it's odd because that's something that business is extraordinarily good at. Sometimes situations like this end badly. Impatient, waiting for corporate IT to deliver solutions, the business often feels like they need to resort to delivering their own handcrafted and unsupported, rogue, short-term software solutions. And as a result, IT ends up with solutions that lack the security and the industrial strength that companies demand today. So on a typical development project, it's not just the capital expenditure for the hardware and the software, it's also the cost it takes and the justification it takes for a 6-person development team on a project. This is one of the things PCS is incredibly good at. Even though the business knew the process and they can model it typically in Visio, they were managing the process manually using weekly conference calls and emails. And a few weeks ago I saw the beautiful Excel spreadsheet. It was very colorful. And they'll even sometimes resort to old workflow tools that they purchased a long time ago. Invariably, these processes are a very important part of their business, so doing nothing is not an option. And most often it means lost business and lost revenue. Bottom line is they wanted to automate what it is that they'd model in Visio and other tools. And once they were able to automate it, they wanted the ability to rapidly improve the process once it went into production. And they wanted to make those changes as quickly as the business needed to change. For Oracle PCS, it was designed from the ground up to address these recurring issues. This session will show you how PCS offers a more business-oriented approach, and it's using smaller, less technical teams to deliver automated process solutions. In the demonstration, I'll include tips on how to get started and how processes are modeled in PCS, how user interfaces are designed and tested, and how end users interact with the completed application once it's put into production. So as you know, the cloud's not just one humongous thing, and the Oracle Cloud's not just one humongous thing, but it does offer a complete vision. But look at the different offerings for both the business and IT. The top layer is targeted largely towards the business. In the middle layer, it's a mix of the business, but mostly IT. Where you see process management here, that represents Oracle Process Cloud Service, and it's a really important part of Oracle's platform as a service offerings. PCS uses some of these other offerings. The thing to remember, though, is PCS is a business-oriented tool. It's where processes are developed by companies, by knowledgeable business people, where they're automated, and where end users can interact with the process all within one web-based tool. With PCS, there's 3 different types of people that are involved with the technology. Oracle PCS is all about enabling rapid business application development and transformation in the cloud. It's a full lifecycle product. And its development and maintenance and use is typically done by these three personas that I'll talk about here. First off, the business analyst. They really understand the business and typically how processes should be improved inside the company. Instead of modeling processes in Visio or PowerPoint, they instead can use a simple web-based tool to create the processes. Although the processes designed in PCS could be used for documentation-only purposes, the business has the ability to deploy and automate those processes to the end users, the people that interact with the application once it's deployed. Here's a second persona, though. Knowledge workers and business analysts, they may be the same people, but PCS has made process automation more intuitive and simpler. The folks in this middle category, they create the user interfaces that the end users interact with, and they tend to be people that are used to powerful tools. You'll see it in the demonstration. They tend to also be the people that map the data carried across the processes. They tend to be the people that invoke the services that IT's exposed. And they create the business rules and the process logic needed to guide the process instances through at runtime. Here's a third persona, the end users. Those are the people that interact with the application once it's deployed. Just to net all this out, this simply means that for the business, they get faster response. The business people, the process owners, and the knowledge workers are on the front lines, and they're the ones that feel the pain, and they're also the ones who create the solution. Costs can be reduced. The cycle time required to deliver the solution is reduced. IT involvement is still needed, but those IT resources are free to expose and orchestrate more services and not necessarily be tied up on this one project. The process owner is able to fund more solutions like this. The teams developing these kinds of solutions in PCS, they're smaller, cost is reduced, and the business only needs to pay for what they need and when they need it. Expansion's easy, and they only expand when it's required. You'll see it in the demonstration. The end users of the system, they benefit because they got full visibility into where the work is. They can work either inside or outside the firewall. And the user interface is a modern, responsive design capable of being viewed on tablets and phones as well as browsers. Notice I left IT off of these three personas, but IT is positively impacted as the business moves to PCS. First off, they're better able to serve the business. Instead of focusing so much on creating applications that they work on for 6 months and then they throw them over the wall to the business without their business involvement, the IT team begins to work and think closely with the business. They're more involved with the business. It's more about exposing services and orchestrating services. What's exciting the directors of the companies that I'm working with, it's a partnership with the business that IT will have. And that partnership's ultimately going to go a long way to help companies be more successful. IT also won't have to focus on patching and maintaining systems. PCS is a cloud-based solution. While IT will still govern and set standards for security, data management, and uptime, PCS gives IT the assurance that it's not a rogue application, that the business has an enterprise-class solution in place that includes high performance, load balancing, failover, continuous availability, and scalability. Don't hit it right now, but up on top is a link that you can hit, and you can download this script for the demo I'm getting ready to do. In this, I'll show you how PCS can easily be used to both model and execute business processes, and those processes can automatically engage the right person with the right contextual data from databases and services at exactly the right time in the process's lifecycle. You'll see that it's done in a way that is auditable and how insights are easily made visible to the business. Once you have access to PCS, the script and the video for this demonstration can be followed along with if you want to use it as a Hello World example to learn the basics of PCS. What I'll build will include the activities in the process that are executed by different people when a candidate is being interviewed and approved for employment. As we go through this, you'll notice there's one tool for everything, and the UI is very simple. I'll explain what each of these mean, but I'll start off by creating a space, an application, and a process in PCS. Well, here's Process Cloud Service. I'll log in as an authorized user, in this case James Cooper. And James Cooper is a knowledge worker or a business analyst. The first thing you'll notice about PCS is that it's got a modern, responsive design. With all the help and the tutorials that are provided, it's designed to make it easy for the business to use. This is the main landing page. And notice that everything that this user is authorized for It's available on this one page. Depending on your role, different options are available. The end user, the business analyst, and the knowledge worker personas, they've all got tools that they need, and they only see the tools that they're authorized to use. We'd like to begin by developing a process, so let's click on this, Develop Processes, and this will take me to Composer. Right up front, notice the help that you get, the videos, the instructions. Well, also notice over here, you've got a concept of having your own space, but you can also create a space that you can share with others. Think of a space as a container or a folder where teams collaborate on BPM applications. So to create one, just click Create in New Space. We're going to call this one Employee Onboarding. You can now open it. Once you open it, you can then share it with others. Initially, it's only yours. So click the Share button at the bottom. All you have to do is enter the user ID that you want to share it with. In this case, I want to share it with Jay Stein. And I can give them different privileges. I'll make this an editor and I'll share it. So now immediately those two people have got access to this space and can work on applications inside of that space. So first, I'll create a new application inside the space I created. If you're familiar with JDeveloper or BPM Process Composer or Oracle BPM Studio already, think of applications as the same as projects. Applications are where the artifacts are created and stored. This is where knowledge workers and business analysts create processes, web forms, the business types. It's where they configure the services to integrate to the outside applications and databases. All I have to do is click New Application, and I'll give it a name. I'll call it Candidate Approval. It's a good idea to document as you go, so give it a meaningful description, and then create it. Notice the edit icon at the top, and that I'm currently viewing the application. This is present because I've shared the space with another user who might also want to be editing the project. After I click the button, any other users that log in, they'll still be able to view the application, but they won't be able to edit it. So these are different things that you can do once you're inside of an application. You can create processes, and processes are where you create the process models. That's where you add the activities and the lanes and the lines or the sequence flows inside of the process. You can create web forms, where you create user interfaces that the end users will interact with when the project's deployed. One of the things we'll do is we'll create a business type, and they're the different ways that you can store information on the forms or inside of your process. These can be built from scratch, or in our case, we're going to build it from an XSD that a developer has given us. If you're familiar with business rules in Oracle SOA Suite or Oracle BPM, this is where you'd add those rules. And down near the bottom, notice Services. That's where you can expose the WSDL needed to invoke services. You can then specify also its timeout and security. So having done this, I've created a space and I've created an application. Well, next, we'll perform the steps necessary to model the process. To create the process, just click this Processes tab over here. When you do that, first thing you'll notice is processes can be created using these 4 different process type patterns. That could save you quite a bit of time. This none is just an empty process. If you know BPMN, it's a none start and a none end. Web form, it gives you an easy way to have an end user start the application with a form. Message, that gives you the process that can begin with a message start and end event. And then finally, you've got the form approval pattern. This is the most robust pattern of the 4. This is good because the form that it begins with, once it's created, it can be saved and reused throughout the rest of the process as well. Because we want a quick start, click the form approval pattern. This will create a process with some simple approval steps that are already created for you. We'll give the process a short, meaningful name. Just as we did before with the application, we'll give the process a short, meaningful description. And then just click the Create button. That'll actually open the process up. Notice in this case, it built a pretty good, simple approval process to start off with. But in the next few steps, we'll customize it for our needs for the approval of employee candidates. Notice on the left, these are called lanes or roles or swim lanes. By default, 2 of these lanes have been created, and I'm going to change these to Department Manager to submit the candidate, and then the Level 2 Approver, which is the manager's manager, and do that now just by right mouse button clicking the header, and then click on Properties, and just click that little Create Radio button right there. If it was an existing one, I'd click that drop down. So here's the first of the two. I just changed it to Department Manager, and I'll rename the other one to Level 2 Approver. And when it comes down, it'll automatically know who the department manager was, and it can automatically assign it to that person's manager as it's stored. So now I've got the two roles, and you can see my approval process is like a conversation between the department manager and the Level 2 Approver. Now notice what happens when the Level 2 Approver rejects it. It'll go back to the department manager. Notice the palette on the right shows the various activities and the gateways and the events. This is all adhering to the Business Process Model and Notation BPMN standard from OMG. It's very simple. If I click Show All, you can see that the human steps, anything you see in green here, it's human. Got two different types of human steps. In the system, I can scroll up and scroll down if I want to. System has got these different types where I can invoke a service or a sub-process. That's a decision or a business rule. And I can create a sub-process activity. There are a few ways to add these lanes. In this case, we just want to add an additional role or a lane to allow the candidate to approve or reject the offer. So I just drag that down there, and notice at the bottom, it just added a new lane at the bottom. I can zoom out so I can see the whole process now. Now I'll just rename a few things just to make the process very clear on what it's doing. So remember, I wanted this to be candidate. I can just double click that and rename the activity. I want candidates to be able to accept offers. This is the reject up here. We'll add a little bit of logic here in a few minutes. We'll give it a good naming standards of uppercase. And up here, we're submitting candidates. This is actually a form. You're thinking it's a start event, but it's a start event that actually kicks it off with a form. It'll come down here. The Level 2 manager, the manager for that manager, will actually approve or reject it. If they reject it, it'll come back up here. If they approve it, it'll go to the candidate for approval. That's really all we have to do for the process at this point. I'll save it. And now here's a navigation tip. Here's how to navigate back to the application home. So it takes me back up, and notice the numbers right here. So as you add artifacts, here I've got one process, increments that number. And as I did that, it automatically creates a business type for me. Next thing we'll do is we'll define the data. Now that we've got the process created, one thing you can do is you can define business type. And that business type could define how you want information stored in the process itself, and it could define how you want it displayed on the forms. Here's one that I've gotten from a developer. Let's say I'm a business analyst, and what they'll do is they'll give you an XML schema definition. Now these can be, don't forget, these can be built from scratch. But in this case, I got this XML schema definition. By the way, you can download this if you're using this as a hello world from that link that I give you. You can see that I've got, it looks like 7 variables. Actually, this is an array down here. And 3 of them are mandatory. This will make these optionals as min occurs right there. So I've got an ID, a first, a last. Those will be mandatory. And then I've got a phone, income status. And I've got an array of job histories. And that could show the list of jobs that this person's had in the past. And in that, you'll have job titles and what their salary was that they've made in the past. So that's what I'm getting ready to import. To add a business object, either building it from scratch or to use that XML schema definition, that XSD, just say new business object. I'm going to name it applicant. If you want to use the XSD, click Advanced Properties, And I can put it into a folder. The default is put it into the root, but I'll put it into a separate folder. I'll call it data. And click OK. So now it's just a folder that it will be placed in, and indicate you want it from an XSD. Now it'll prompt you from where do you want to get the XSD, and again you can download this. Click on the plus sign, and it'll ask you where you want to get it from. A little bit of shameless advertising, that's what I named this XSD. And then just click on OK. So it's a little wizard that'll take you through. Now, when you do get this as an XSD, be mindful of one thing. This is the one you want. Don't click the type. And remember the list of jobs, don't click that either. You want the root right there. So we'll say HR employee data, and then just click finish on the wizard. And you can see it gave me HR employee record type, but most importantly, this is the business object, the business type that I want, called applicant. Now we could do this from scratch, but now that we've got that data type defined, called applicant, we'll use that to create a form, and that form will be used to display information to end users, both during testing and when this thing is deployed and put in production. One way to create the form would be just to click on this Web Forms tab and create it with that little plus icon right there. Another way to do it, though, is to click on the process in this tab up here. Notice all these human activities or human tasks in the process. Each one of those will have a form associated, and they can be the same form if it's got the same data. In addition to that, unlike the on-premise Oracle BPM, this start event can be kicked off with a form itself. So this has got a form, and anything that's green right here has got a form associated with it as well. So to add that, I'll just double-click this right here. I'll give it a meaningful title, and that'll be important in a few minutes. You'll see why. But this is what'll show up that the end user will know to click on to create an instance, in this case, of a work item in the process. And you can give it a meaningful description. And finally, this is what we're really here for, is we double click that start, and I would like to create a new one by clicking that plus sign right there. And I'm going to call it applicant. Once you've done that, you can actually open up the form directly from here by clicking this little edit button. So the user tasks that were added in the BPM process, that start event that had a form associated with it, as a business analyst or a knowledge worker using PCS, forms are actually built by them. Forms are easy to create and they're easy to test. You'll see that you can either create a form from scratch simply by dragging these form elements onto the form itself, or by doing what we just did, and that was to create the business type and then have that represent elements or fields on the form. In this, I'll show you how to do both. So I mentioned I want to use that type. If I open this up, you'll see there's nothing there, but it's easy to add that type. You just click on that little icon right there in the upper right hand corner, Manage Business Objects. Now I just need to tell it which business object to use. Remember, it was called applicant, and it was in that folder called data. And you select it and say OK. Now notice something different. I've got a expandable data source, and this is the one right here. The root of that was HR employee record, and I can click right here on this plus sign and watch this. Automatically it just added all of those elements onto the form. Let's say I don't like the widget that's associated with it. Here I've got income. In reality, that should be money, that right there. Just click on Properties and change it to display it as money. So it's easy to add all those fields. It automatically places it onto the form. If I'm applying for a job, you'd like it to display the position that's being applied for. And that can be a variety of different positions, and you don't want them to have to type it in. What you can do is you can just drag it from the palette and indicate where you want it to go. I'm going to put mine above status right here. And it's now called Dropdown 11. I'm going to call it position. I'm going to change that to position. If I've just got a list of hard-coded positions, So I'll change that. And I'll save my work. Now I can actually preview the form with that updated information. And this information could have been pulled off of a database using a REST service. But you can see it just did a nice job of those hard-coded values right there. So the palette is pretty rich. You've got tables, and then I could have different types of fields like text area. I could have date. I put in email addresses where it'll validate, make sure it's a valid email address. And of course phone numbers. And there's just integers for quantities. And Boolean true false. And there's a radio button right here. Save your work. I'm getting ready to test this as a business analyst, but one of the things I have to do is I have to assign people to a task. Let's go back to the process and I'll show you what we're going to do here. We've got a form, and the form right now is associated with that. Notice when it comes here, it's going to go to the manager's manager. Right now, we don't have that assigned to the manager's manager. So in this, I'll show you how to do that. I'll show you how to associate that form that was created up here, how to associate that same form with this human activity. And finally, I'll show you how to show a meaningful title to the task when it reaches that point, so it knows the candidate's name when it reaches that right there. So start off with just double-click the activity. If I wanted multiple levels, I would have picked that. And I could specify I wanted to go 3 levels up. But in this case, I just wanted to go to the manager's manager. So single assignee, click the little edit button. Leave that set to names and expressions. Click the plus, I'm going to add a user. So pick by expression, and then a little expression builder right here. Notice there's 2 tabs. Here's the tricky part. Click on Operations. How do you get the manager? Click on Operations. It's under Identity Service. Expand it, and then get the manager. Insert it into the expression. Okay, put the cursor between the parentheses right there. Now I want to go back and I want to figure out who the department manager was that created this instance. So to do that, click on Data Objects. It's that right there. So every instance, it's got these predefined variables, and this is one of them. So the creator, just click Insert into Expression. When you're done, your expression should look like that. Click on this little helpful Validate button right here. And if you don't have a syntax error, you'll get that message right there. Click on OK, and then click on OK again. Notice this human task right here. I don't have a web form associated with it. We're going to fix that right now by clicking this little browse, and we're going to associate the existing form that we created. Click Applicant, and then click OK. And we've got one more thing to do while we're in this panel. Unique title. So when the list is shown to end users, how do you want to let them know what the candidate is so they can just pick a task? So it's like the subject in an email. So they pick the right one. Well, change this to expression. We're going to use that payload coming in to this form, and we're going to use that to set the title. So expression, expression editor. Remember the applicant. Now I've got applicant right there. So this, if you remember, this was the information that we added to the form. Remember I added one field to the form? It was position. Remember the XSD? It had all of these fields. Well, this is what you want. You want applicant right here. So expand that. And what I'm going to do is show the end user the applicant's first name and then concatenate it with the last name. So here goes. Click on first. Insert in the expression. Now we'd like it to say first space last name, right? You do that with this plus sign. Double quote, space character, close double quote, plus sign. And then add the last name right there. You can do the same thing and click Validate right here. And it's still valid. I've got no syntax errors. We want to do one more thing. What if we've got different types of processes here? We kind of like to identify it by saying something like this, space candidate, so they know they're approving a candidate. Do a validate one more time. And notice I've got an error right there, so it caught me. Close double quote is probably what the problem is. And sure enough, and click on OK. Here's one important thing. You'll be tempted to click the Save button right there. Don't do it. Click Apply Changes before you do anything. So you've made this change down here. I've got an applicant web form. I've made this change right there. So what's going to be my description when people see the list of tasks right there? It's going to be first name and last name. But click Apply Changes. If you forget to do that, your changes won't be saved. Okay, so this is taking quite a bit of real estate. I'm going to collapse this pane by clicking that little icon. Now I can save the application. Well, here we'll actually do two things. We'll define what the process's payload is, the data inside of the process. We'll map the data coming into that activity for the level 2 manager's approval. And when the manager rejects it, we want to pick that up and actually have the logic in the process pick that up and go back to the original department manager. So right now we have a process payload element, and it was the payload that's associated with that form up there. It was automatically created. Processes have data objects. If I click that, you'll see it. And this data object was created for me automatically for this process. So that's my process payload. And it's exactly the same elements that were on my form. So this is mapped automatically for me when I created the form. Click the event, click data association, and look at that right there. That's the process payload. So coming out of that event, it's mapped, right? But this is not. I need information flowing in, and for this to work, I need information flowing out. So click it, click data association, and that's what we want. We want applicant right here, and we're going to drag that in. So here's my activity, approved candidate in the middle there, and I'm dragging that into that field. And for it to work, I also needed to go out of that activity. So now the activity, when the form comes up, it's going to be populated by the process with the input. And if someone changes any of the elements on the form, that's going to go back out into the process as well. Look right here, we've got one more thing though, is I'd like to be able to pick up which button was selected from the form, and that's actually stored on the outcome. So when this comes out, I can actually pick it up from the process. The reason why that's important is I need to route it back to the department manager. I can add that right here. So just click add, but click string, because it's a string. The button stores it in a string, and I'll call it approval output. So OK, close that. What that did was that gave me a new process payload variable called approval output, and now I'm going to map that in to the corresponding element for outcome. So the button that got clicked, that's mapped. The applicant information on the form, that's mapped. The applicant information coming into the form, that's now mapped. Don't forget this, you have to click apply. If you don't do that, your changes aren't saved. And I always click on save right about then. So now the data associations coming in and going out of that are all mapped. The reason why we did that was, here's a candidate being entered by the department manager. It's approved or rejected by that manager's manager right here. But if they reject it, I want it to go back up. The reject button on the form is in the output variable that just got mapped to approval output. So to set that condition right there, to make it flow through this, I need Boolean true false logic. Just double click it and click the edit button down here. I'm going to edit that condition. See, that's the variable that was just added. Insert it. Double equal sign. Open double quote. And it's uppercase. Even though the button will look uppercase R and the rest lowercase, make it reject. I could validate before I say OK. And then say OK. Once again, don't forget to click Apply Changes, and I'll minimize this dialog right there. Overall, you can do a validate just like you can do it in the expression editor. Let's do a validate real quick, see if I'm overall syntactically correct. It looks good to go. I'm going to save it. This time I'm going to do something a little different. There's a publish button right there. So once I've saved it, I'm actually going to publish it, and it puts it into a source control system. Once I publish it, other people will be able to view, and if I unlock it, other people will be able to edit it. So if I release the lock right now, they'd be able to edit it. This is the first time I've published it, so I'll just say first. Publish it. So now it's in a source control system on the cloud. Well, now you're ready to test the process as a business analyst. While you're doing that, you'll have the process up the whole time. But number one, you'll be able to test out the forms, and number two, you'll be able to test out the flow through the process as you do this using the player option. Well, here's the player option that I just mentioned. It's that little icon in the upper right-hand corner. For this to work, process has to be syntactically correct. So I've already validated, I've already saved it. I'm ready to click play and test the application. Now I've got two choices right now. I can play it, and in a few minutes we'll test it by deploying it and running it from the workspace. But first I'll play it. Notice that little play icon right there on the submit. Click that. Now initially there'll be no users that you can select from. So click on Manage Role Mappings. And I have to associate a user, we'll say Jay Cooper in this case. And it's just easy if you just click this all. So Jay Cooper is going to be a super user, and click Add Mapping. And scroll down, there's an OK button at the bottom. Select Jay Cooper and click play. Now notice the form comes up. This is a form associated with that start event. I've got 3 mandatory fields, as we knew. I could test it to make sure that my REST services are working, but in this case I don't have any. But I did hard code the position, so I'll select that. Now when I submit it, what will happen is it should go down to the level 2 approver. And when I bring the form up as a level 2 approver, we should see those same fields populated. Let's try it. So here I've got Jay Stein. Remember that I assigned it to the manager? Well, Jay Stein is actually Jay Cooper's manager, so that was working splendidly. Automatically associated it with the manager and launched the form. And there we go. The data associations are working. So I did my data mapping correctly. Watch this though. If I click reject, I can actually test the flow of the process downstream. And now if I had approved it, it would have gone down that path right there. So far it's working great. I've tested the forms and I've tested the process flow based on the button that I clicked right there. Well, now that we've tested it, I'm ready to deploy the process. When I deploy it, you'll see it goes to a test environment. If I had sufficient privileges, I could have also deployed it to a production environment. So 2 deployment environments exist with PCS out of the box. Well, here's a simple way to deploy the process. And again, I'm deploying it to a test environment. So before I click this test application, and last time I played it as a business analyst so I could see the process, well this time it's going to deploy it, but I'll actually be able to test it as an end user showing the workspace with the tasks. So click Test. I published it recently, but I'm going to deploy the current and deploy. And I can just click on this URL right here and it'll take me right to the workspace for testing. So nearing the end, here's how to execute the process as an end user. So here's the URL that came up when I deployed it. I'll click on the link. Now I'm logged in as John Steinbeck right now. I'll log in as Jay Cooper. And recall, this is how I got in originally. I've been over here, that's where I was, developing a process. And now the area that I'm in is I'm going to work on tasks because I've deployed it. Now the initiator, the start event, that's actually invoked through this little icon right there. Remember that description that I entered? That pop-up is there because of the description. Looks identical to what we had in the player. Now at this point I could also upload files as attachments. I could test that out. I'll just go ahead and submit it. So it's successfully created an instance. And to see that, I could click on Work on Tasks. And notice I don't see anything in my task list. And recall that when it reached the second activity, it was actually being sent to Jay Stein, who was Jay Cooper's manager. I was logged in as Jay Cooper. So I'm going to log out and log in this time as Jay Stein. Notice Jay Stein doesn't have privileges to start, so he doesn't see a little start event circle right there. But if I click on Work on Tasks, and I see the instance that was in my queue, I see that it came from Jay Cooper just a few minutes ago. And I can see the information that flowed through. At this point, I could escalate it to my manager. I could reassign it to somebody else. I could request additional information from somebody else. Or I could just approve or reject it. One of the interesting things that wasn't obvious because I only created one, if I had several over here, I could click several of those and I could approve all of those that I had clicked. If I've got enough information right here to tell what it is that I'm doing, I can click approve for multiple or reject multiple like that. Now the instance has been sent on its way to the next activity in the process. Well, here's the last thing we'll do as part of the demonstration is we'll use a dashboard to monitor what's going on inside of the process. Well, to view the dashboard, I have to be logged in as someone with sufficient privileges, and so I'll sign out. In this case, WebLogic has administrator privileges. Notice the different tiles that WebLogic can see. They can also manage applications, but this is what I really want to do right here. I want to view the dashboards. If there had been suspended instances recoverable, one of the really nice features is, as a business person, I don't have to go to Enterprise Manager or anything outside. I can handle those suspended or recoverable instances or things in alert status right here by clicking that right there. I'm going to click on View the Dashboards though. Again, same thing. I can see a good count up here and I can just click right there and I can see the instances. You can see I've got 3 active instances that are inside of this process right there. I can see the instances that are open, my workload, how it's distributed. And probably most important, what's overdue or getting ready to get overdue. Out of the box, I can see cycle time. Here's some typical use cases that we're seeing PCS for use today. PCS's simplicity and the ease of use make it ideal for business-driven applications, and those can include just modeling a business process. Instead of doing it in Visio, do it in something that at least has the potential of being automated. The benefit to just modeling, though, is that everybody reaches a common understanding of what it is the business is doing in a certain area and what they need to do to improve it, and they can all have input. What's different about this is it's not a Visio that you're sending over email. It's actually a model that they can view, and if they have permissions, they can actually edit the process to improve their process. And as you saw in the demo, once you've modeled it, you've actually got workflow. Unlike Visio and process modeling tools, you can actually execute whatever it is that you model. So work automatically gets sent to the right person with the right contextual data at exactly the right time in the process. The other thing is documents. As work travels through the process, documents can be attached, and they can automatically be sent to the right people with the documents that they need to do their work. Escalations in companies are often needed, and not just when it becomes overdue, but also when amount thresholds, when exceptions occur. As you saw in the demo, the number of escalations and who it goes to can dynamically be set, and they can be set inside of a decision or a business rule. And don't forget, it's not just modeling and it's not just workflow, but also you can integrate to other applications and services. It's on the cloud, so you can integrate to those solutions that are outside the firewall. Down below are just 4 examples. Those are things that could be applied today with PCS. So just a heads up, I'm a couple of minutes away from starting the Q&A, so if you have questions, be sure to post them now. And to summarize, there are many good reasons why businesses ought to be considering PCS and why IT should be supporting the business in this. It's going to reduce IT's workload. It's an easy-to-use, non-technical tool. The Oracle Process Cloud Service, it lets business shift away from their traditional way of doing things. With PCS, business knowledge workers, process owners, business analysts, and IT, they're all enabled to work together, and they can drive businesses with greater impact and actually achieve their business goals, but do it quicker and do it at reduced cost. The risks and the approvals associated with startup and capital expenditure costs are reduced. The traditional IT infrastructure and software licenses, those are gone. I don't know if you run into it, but I run into it regularly. The time and the cost it takes IT to get environments up and running and patched, that's eliminated. And with PCS, business doesn't have to wait for that. Business is immediately productive with PCS. So we'll jump over and we'll answer your questions. One thing before we start the Q&A, though, is just to remember Oracle Process Cloud Service, PCS. In a nutshell, it's a very democratic tool. It increases the collaboration within the business. It increases the collaboration and common understanding with business and IT. It increases the collaboration both inside and outside the organization and can be a rapid enabler of business change.